Oi, oi! It's your boy, the Devison Figueiredo of saying it'll be okay, though. Jack Slack, and this is the Jack Slack podcast, coming at you post UFC 270, and I had a good time. I hope you had a good time. I didn't stay up to watch it. I thought that would be fucking insane to try and stay up until 6 a.m. to watch this card, but I did manage to, without setting an alarm or anything, wake up at 5 a.m. and I went, you know what, fuck it, the main event's probably on about now. Got the laptop out, snuck out of the bedroom, left the wife in bed, and I managed to watch the fight as it happened and live tweet some silly shit at the same time. I like to do that sometimes just to keep people on their toes. I had a really good time with this, and then I went back and watched the rest of the fights today, had some fun. Today being Sunday, I'll be releasing this podcast on Monday probably, but yeah, really good really good little card, I thought, for what was on it. This is my second time recording this because the first time I just went off on a rant about Fighter Pay. I will do that, but I'll try and keep it more contained. If you don't want to hear about Fighter Pay, you can put your head in the sand by clicking in the timestamps on YouTube. But this event is important because it brought it up. I mean, half of the narrative here was that Francis Ngannou was unhappy about his pay and treatment at the hands of the UFC. This was the last fight of his current contract. And, you know, there's an awful lot going on because the championship clause may or may not be real. We talked about this last time on the Boycast, but if you win as the champion, supposedly it extends your contract by one fight every time you do it, which is, yeah, interesting. I've heard people say that that's a very sketchy area legally, could be hard to enforce, but I've also heard people say that, yes, it is actually in the contracts. So we'll see how that plays out. I expect he'll just get more money. But the UFC took this event to California instead of their usual Nevada or bumfuck wherever. California, while their commission is as inept as most other commissions, it's still better than a lot of commissions, but they have one interesting thing that we haven't seen in quite a while. The Nevada State Athletic Commission, which has always had an interesting relationship with the UFC, if you want to learn about that, look at why Mark Ratner's in the UFC Hall of Fame, and how Lorenzo Fertitta was on the NSAC board before the UFC was, when the UFC was struggling, then bought the UFC, and then it became legal to license UFC fights there. Or something like that. Go look at the actual story. Not my half-assed recollection of it. Or was it Frank who was on the... I can't even fucking remember. But anyway, the NSAC were quietly leaned on by the UFC. I don't even suspect that hard. But they made it so that where payouts were previously made public, they now no longer have to be, and that's been the case for a couple of years now, I think. Which is why this is the thing about it. It makes, by not having numbers out there, it makes all discussion about UFC payment nebulous. We're all sort of groping around going, well, we don't really know. And then a payout sheet like this comes out and you go, fucking hell. To cut to the chase of it, the entire card got about $2 million worth of payouts. Now, the revenue split is the thing we're always interested in because that's how other major leagues do it. MLB, NFL, NHL, NBA, MLK, they all have close to 50% revenue split. Whatever the revenue is of the league, the athletes are paid half of that. And that is because the athletes are an expense. It's not like, well, we'll wait and see how the profit is and then we'll pay you out of that. But the revenue split was kept under wraps for many years. The UFC fought tooth and nail not to release financials, and they had to release some in the course of an ongoing class action lawsuit or antitrust lawsuit, whatever it is. It's a lawsuit about how they basically have a monopoly in mixed martial arts. And after years of fighting it, they had to release some financials. And it looked like the revenue split was ticking up, and it was about 16%, 10 years ago or whatever they released. However, if you look at this event, $2 million total payouts, if you get it to 20 million revenue just for this event, and revenue splits are generally done on like a full year or, the previous year or whatever. But if you just look at this event, $2 million total payout, that would be 10% or less if we got over $20 million in revenue. It would take you about 266,000 buys, which would be a very low amount for a heavyweight title fight, buy rate in the UFC. It would only take 266,000 pay-per-view buys to break that number. and for the revenue split of this card to be under 10%. That's before you consider that they sell a bunch of fucking tickets to the stadium. They have television deals with many, many countries. Everything from the cage to the fighters is splashed with advertising. They still run ad reads on their own pay-per-view events. So the revenue from this event is going to be well over $20 million. And your main event fighters got $600,000 for Francis Ngannou, $500,000 for Cyril Gane, according to this payout sheet. Now, if you're one of those people who's obsessed with like, oh, locker room bonuses, yeah, sure, this multi-billion-dollar company that's publicly owned now is paying all of its fighters massive bonuses, cash in hand behind the scenes, undisclosed, just like the taxman loves. No, use your fucking noodle. And if you wanted to do a little bit more maths there, Francis Ngannou's total payout could be covered with 8,000 pay-per-views. Again, not factoring in the many, many other sources of revenue that the UFC has on every event. Now, it's pretty insane that the baddest man on the planet is being paid $500,000 when someone like Sean Porter, in his last fight against Bud Crawford, where he was the losing fighter, he was certainly the B side of the draw of the headline. He made $4 million doing that. And, I've been talking to people all day who've been like, oh, but we don't know the expenses of the UFC. And you're like, well, that's firstly not the fighter's fucking problem. If you can't run a successful league on 50% of the revenue, or paying the athletes 50% of the revenue, you're fucking up somewhere, and it isn't in paying the fighters. But do you imagine the UFC? I mean, have you ever been to a fucking UFC event? It's well run, but there's not an awful lot going on there, more than you would expect in like a major boxing card. So that's a little bit embarrassing that Sean Porter, for his last fight, which I would feel very confident saying sold less than this, earned double the total payout of this card for losing. And that's not like, oh, overpaid footballers, wow, people who cry about that shit. No, that's, the promoter is clearly still made a profit, kept the lights on, they're not struggling. But that's just the main event stuff. I mean, the more disgusting stuff, really, if you follow this sport heavily, is lower down the card. Awful lot of fighters fighting for 10 and 10, which is the absolute bottom people come in at. The really insane thing is that people are fighting on the Contender Series. Your prize for winning on the Contender Series and doing it in a suitably exciting style is that you get like one of those tough contracts. You come in on 10 and 10 for however many fights. I mean, Jack Della, who I'm going to talk about a lot later, and I talked about in my previous episode, saying like, oh, is the Contender Series always this good? And it definitely wasn't. But everything the UFC wants, did everything the UFC wants, finished the guy on the Contender Series looking awesome, came in, finished this guy looking awesome, still on 10 and 10. Absolutely insane. And then you got a guy who came in, got the gig on short notice, didn't come through the Contender Series. Michel Pereira's opponent, Andre Fialho, his reward for not going through the Contender Series is that he gets $2,000 more. He got $12,000 to get his ass kicked by one of the best guys in the world in that division. And, best guys, I mean like top 20, 30 guys in the world. But yeah, like $12,000. And after tax, which is higher in California than Nevada, and after expenses, because he's got a whole team, it's not a fucking individual sport, even though to appearances it is, that guy probably goes home with like 2/3 to half of that. And it's not me trying to be charitable to get these people paid more. The sport gets better if people can train full-time and live as professional athletes. It's like that, and people were bringing up this week this insane clip of Dana talking at, I think it was Harvard or somewhere. He's saying like, I will not pay a fighter millions of dollars because then they lose their hunger to fight. You're like, no, they don't. Like, the whole point of paying athletes a lot now, it's like, I mean, I moaned about it earlier, but people get mad at millionaire footballers. There was a thing here in the UK where they were trying to get footballers to pay the staff, the ground staff's fees during the lockdown. And you're like, no, the fucking owners should pay the staff's fees during the lockdown. Just because you see these guys getting millions of dollars, their entire career is front loaded. They are not going to become doctors or lawyers or whatever because all their time is spent fucking training for this thing they can only do until they're 40, probably. But anyway, I mean, this is a part of a larger rant. It's not going to get any better for fighters because they are so divided and individual, and there are talented guys out there who will come up and do it for nothing. What we need is a few champions and big names to get together and fucking, take collective action. However, the best way to do that would be to get someone like Ali Abdelaziz, who's got a lot of top names under contract, and then have them negotiate together or hold out together. But that won't happen because Ali is basically controlled opposition, it seems. Whenever someone signs with Ali, they go, oh, they're going to the UFC now, because he's basically, it's like when one championship said they were only going to deal with agents that they'd personally approved in their one program or whatever it was. And you go, oh, so someone who will agree with you rather than someone who will negotiate and argue with you. But yeah, that's what Ali Abdelaziz is to the UFC. Anyway, that's the reason that's come up so heavily this week. They disclosed the payouts. Probably won't happen again for a while. They'll avoid California. They'll keep going to fucking Vegas and other places that don't disclose the payouts. But remember this, for any time someone starts telling you, no, he probably made 3 or 4 million at the end of the day. His payout was fucking $600,000, and he's one of the biggest stars in the UFC right now. Anyway, let's talk about these fights. So from the top, Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gane. Really enjoyed this one. There's going to be a lot of contrarian takes about lay and pray and so on. I thought it was compelling and rich, and I thought I saw people saying oh, don't you miss DC, someone who could actually grapple. I thought the grappling was pretty solid in this one. The wrestling was solid. The striking was solid. I think let's go from the top. Round 1, Cyril Gane confirms that he is very fucking quick, because Francis Ngannou is pretty bloody quick, and Cyril Gane was able to needle him with the jab and either get out of the way or close in, put his head on. He'd basically put his forehead on Francis Ngannou's neck and be too close to hit, as we talked about last week on the Boycast. And it worked really well. And just watching that jab through the first 2 rounds, you were going, damn, that's a really nice jab. Because I'd watched him snap people's heads back with it. But I thought, Ngannou, bit bigger, one of the taller guys and longer guys that Gane has faced. Good reactions in his own right, dangerous counterpuncher, but Gane was able to get in and get out scot-free most of the time. Got pushed to the fence very early by Ngannou, and he ducked in on a clinch, drove Ngannou back across the cage, and demonstrated what we said on the Boycast, you want him ducking into clinches. And I said this also on the Boycast, but people fixated on, or people will fixate on Stipe not being able to get Ngannou down and be well, wrestling doesn't work on him anymore and striking doesn't work on him anymore, so what are you going to do? And it's no, it's a combination of the both of 2 things, and it's also what takedowns are you attempting, what wrestling are you attempting, what strikes are you attempting. There's an awful lot of scope within those things. Sprawling on stuffing the head on a single leg and sprawling on it one time is not complete wrestling invincibility. Jose Aldo is a masterful takedown defender in the UFC. He's got something like a 80%, 85% takedown defense rate, and he's been doing it forever against really good wrestlers. And Rob Font hit that beautiful little head outside single because he knew if he ducked in, Aldo would turn side on and feed the single like he always does against the double. And Rob Font slid basically right past him and to his back in the very first takedown attempt of that fight. And then as the fight continued, Aldo adjusted a bit, but that was just something that he'd prepared for Aldo, and Aldo wasn't prepared for that. So yeah, the idea that wrestling is off the table for everyone against Francis Ngannou, no. But early going, yep, Francis was lagging behind Gane. Gane was spearing him with a good jab and some pokey kicks. We talked about pokes last week, but the front kick to the body I thought would be a big one. It looked like he was struggling to really get Ngannou with that. He was stomping with his whole foot a lot of the time to just keep Ngannou off. And kicks to the lead leg. This is where it's going to get interesting because I'm going to talk about this a lot more later, but kicks to the lead leg, he was only really sort of slapping it. And you did see in the 3rd and 4th round, it might have been the 4th round, it was really bad, but he was doing that little slappy outside leg kick with his lead leg to Francis Ngannou's lead leg because it's a southpaw versus orthodox matchup. And even with those slappy kicks, Ngannou was getting jarred at the knee, and then he was changing to southpaw for periods. And that's really quite telling because Gane didn't get to sit down on his kicks a lot in this fight. And afterwards, of course, we came out with the discovery that Ngannou had suffered a knee injury in the lead up to this fight. And in the Boycast, we were talking about how important kicks are, or low kicks are against a power puncher anyway, to take away their ability to throw their weight from one leg to the other. But at no point did Gane really get after that leg. It was mainly poking and slapping away, and he still managed to cause some damage on it. So when the inevitable rematch comes, you got to hope, he didn't really do when you watch him against JDS or Derek Lewis, he does really hard kicking with his right leg to the opponent's right leg when he switches to southpaw. When he wants to really start punting that leg, he switches to orthodox. He switches to orthodox so that his rear leg is going into the outside of that lead leg. And those are the ones he really hurts guys with. And he didn't ever do that against Ngannou. Now, obviously, there's also the danger of Ngannou coming back with counterpunches. Ngannou, in his own right, clearly at the speed disadvantage in this fight, and he probably knew that coming in. If you saw the training footage of them, they looked like they knew each other pretty well, even if they didn't train together a huge amount. But this did look quite similar to their training footage. It was Cyril floating around on the outside and Ngannou sort of following him and waiting for him to come in and working at the speed disadvantage. But what I really did like from Ngannou was his use of body shots. Landed some really nice ones, like right straights to the body, right hooks to the body, and the takedown, the one that they were on about, the body slam, was Gane tried to kick him in the face, went over Ngannou's shoulder as Ngannou hit him in the body with a punch, and then Ngannou threw him over. But most of the body hitting in this fight was done by Ngannou, rather than Gane kicking the body. And Ngannou, in his own right, used some nice body kicks to close in on Gane. He used a nice step-up left body kick to cut Gane off as he was circling around the cage. Very Fedor Krokop-esque. There's a really nice instance of Fedor using a round kick to the body and then coming in and taking the collar tie and hammering 3 body punches against Krokop. But he also used a great step-up body kick or high kick. I can't even remember what it was, but it was a nice round kick. And as Gane came back to counter, Ngannou dropped his leg and just ducked into a clinch, and that's where he started working on the wrestling in, I think, round 4 or maybe round 3. But all you're probably here for is to hear about Francis Nurmagomedov, Nurmagomedov, or I called him Francis Njitsu. But he went to the takedowns. He looked good. He's been working with Usman, obviously, and first takedown was off a kick, but in round 4 and 5, he was working more progressively through clinches, ducked in on a double leg along the fence after hitting a body shot. Was looking pretty dangerous from top position, but Gane was also looking very active from bottom position, which is, this is when you watch Juan Espino or, who's the fat lad who forearm choked someone? Who fought Juan Espino? Those 2 big lads, or like Alexei Olenek or whoever it is, basically any good top player at heavyweight, they get people down, and then the big guys can't get up from underneath other big guys. They just get stuck there, and they're like, oh, fuck. You watch Augusto Sakai underneath Overeem. Overeem leg drags him, sits on one of his legs, in a position where in lighter weight classes in jiu-jitsu, you see it all the time, they'll leg drag and the other guy just turns to his knees, fast as anything. But Overeem sat up and started punching him, expecting him to turn and give his back. And Sakai goes to and can't get out from underneath Overeem's weight. It's a lot of weight to be trying to get out from underneath, is what I'm saying, 250, 260. And they were speculating how big Francis was come fight time, because he looked significantly bigger than Gane, who himself is fucking massive. But I like what Gane was doing from the bottom, coming up on single legs, on the underhook from half guard. Got mounted very briefly and immediately kneed Ngannou in the arse to get him forward, dug under his leg and started coming up on a single from under there. It was interesting watching, because I watched it at the time, and then I watched it again because I got tired from watching all the fights and getting up at 5 a.m. But the first time I was watching it, I was very much on tenterhooks, because I was like, oh man, if Francis starts opening up with punches here, Gane's got to be really careful. You don't want to be, because there were points where he's getting wrist control and going to the turtle and starting to build up. But those Dan Henderson Fedor uppercuts under the armpit, if someone like Ngannou hit you with one of those, you'd be in real trouble. But watching this fight, the second time I was really aware of just how little or how uncomfortable Ngannou felt opening up with strikes. Because if someone like DC got you in half guard as readily as Ngannou did here, he'd be dropping elbows, he'd be trying to land on you, and if you were getting up, he'd be like, oh, okay, cool, I'll take him down again, or I'll try and control them and get them back onto their back and then hit them some more. But this fight looked very much like Ngannou taking him down and trying to keep him down at all costs, and Gane being able to get up a lot of the time. And then the big moment was round 5. I think Gane took Ngannou down once, but he ended up on top of him regardless, and in his guard, and everyone was like, oh, he sat back on a leg lock, and at the time I was watching it going, oh, did he sit back on a leg lock? Oh no, Ken Shamrock's folly 25 years later, which is something I made a little video about a while ago, but I don't think I have it up on the channel anymore. But Ken Shamrock versus Royce Gracie 1, because they've done 3 now, but at UFC 1, and also Ken Shamrock versus Masakatsu Funaki 2, I think. He gets on top of the guy, stands up in their guard, and jumps back on a leg attempt, either a heel hook or a straight ankle into a heel hook. But he doesn't put one knee in between him and the other guy, so both Masakatsu Funaki and Royce Gracie sit up with him and just get on top of him in mount. And that's how he lost both those fights. And then years later, he tried it again against Don Fry, and he did put the knee in the middle, and Fry couldn't sit up. But, putting the knee in the middle stops the guy immediately sitting up on you, but guys are good enough at standing up from a straight ankle lock now that if you go for a straight ankle lock, or, you go for a heel hook and you can't get the knee reaped in, the guy will turn his knee out and stand up on you. So that's what it looked like to happen. But then watched it again a couple of times because people were raving about it online. Gane has one knee up in this sort of opening guard of Ngannou, and he looks like he tries to stand up, and Ngannou hacks the standing leg out and sort of scissor sweeps him. It was Mike Fowler, I think, used to do it. It was called like the unstoppable sweep or something like that, but he used to like basically scissor sweep a guy, but only their leg as they stood up. So almost like doing a low single, but with your legs scissoring. And you have to control the arms so that they fall on their side. And that's in the gi. So all that out of the way as a disclaimer. But as it looked like Gane went to stand, and as he got off balance, he put his foot in as if to attack the leg attack. But I was also thinking like he did look like he was trying, standing in that way with the leg wrapped already. It looked like he was trying to jump back on a leg as well. So I don't know which one. It's the thing we can't ascribe. I can't get inside the guy's mind and tell you what he was trying to do at the time. I can only tell you how it played out. And it played out badly. He ended up on the bottom underneath and Gane couldn't get into an X guard or anything like that that you would use to try and get out of bottom leg attacking positions. And the remainder of the 5th round was basically Francis holding top position. That's the excitement done. So I think like what we're going to talk about now is like the aftermath of this fight. Firstly, great for Ngannou, and obviously I hope that he gets a ton more money and opens the door for some of these other guys. Or, I hope he finds a way to get to Bellator or whatever. And also, shout out to Joe Rogan, because whenever someone asks about like boxing or whatever, my eyes roll so far back into my head I can see my own brain. But I thought that was a baller move, subtly giving him leverage on air because he's at the end of his contract. And if he can get out of it to box, why not? Or at least have that threat. Obviously, probably couldn't get away with saying, like, will you be going to Bellator or One Championship or wherever? Will you consider going to other MMA organizations? Because oftentimes the UFC line is to, like, pretend other organizations don't exist unless they've already bought them. So, like, they'll build Mousasi as former Strikeforce champion or whatever, but they don't like to say, like, Michael Chandler, former Bellator champion. They'll go, well, he's had success all around the world. He's been a world champion. But no, I wouldn't hold out hopes for Ngannou. But actually, I say that. Tyson Fury does love doing, like, tune-ups. And it would be a tune-up for a huge amount of money. But yeah, I mean, if you watch this and you were like, Ngannou, I mean, even with, like, healthy leg Ngannou or whatever, if you watch this and you're like, yes, he's got it for Tyson Fury, I don't know what you were watching. Like, the guy couldn't get away from the jab. But it was encouraging to see him doing new things, developing as a fighter. And then for Cyril Gane, after the fight, he was apologizing to everyone, and you're just like, why? You lost a 3-2 split on the scorecards against a guy who doesn't go past the first minute a lot of the time. He got hit by him and was fine, and he avoided most of his punches. So it's very encouraging for the rematch. I mean, yes, maybe Ngannou's knee health is as bad as he says, and he was unable to put the same power in his shots, but he was struggling to time him. So yeah, I mean, obviously a rematch is going to be very compelling. And with these guys being who they are, I don't imagine France, because who's next in line? Stipe? He's probably going to want out of the game soon because he's getting quite old. And he looked very rough in their last fight. But then the other option is like Taito Ivasa is now top ranked for a heavyweight title shot. And I just cannot see Ngannou struggling much with him. And Gane, who's going to trouble Gane in like fighting his way back to number one contender? So I think we're probably going to get this again. If Ngannou stays in the organisation. And I think, it'd be very interesting, Gane knowing about the legs. Well, I mean, he'll be kicking himself knowing about the injury now, not going to the legs harder, but generally just go to the legs harder. And Ngannou, man, keep applying that wrestling because it looked very scary to have to deal with. I was joking about like having seen him pick up Shaq. I knew that he could wrestle like that, but he is clearly a very strong man. And then after the fight, everyone was obsessed with the fact that Dana didn't turn up at the press conference. And you're like, well, this is the great thing. They're selling this fight on Ngannou being unhappy with how he's underpaid. And by paying him less, they're getting promotion out of it. So by not turning up to this presser, they're making heat, as they say in the professional wrestling business. You know, you're getting people invested in it again. It's crazy. It's like you can't lose as a promoter. Unless you sack Ikebara, and then everything you touch turns to shit. But let's talk about the rest of this card. Co-main, Brandon Moreno versus Deiveson Figueiredo. Deiveson Figueiredo picks up the win, turning back the clock, because a lot of people in the lead up to this were saying like, oh, he didn't look like himself the last fight. I think he's slowed down. I think he's lost it, this, that, and the other. Went to train with Henry Cejudo and Eric Albarracin, and every established fighter that I see go and train with them comes in and fights smarter, with the exception of Paulo Costa. But like the work they did with Weili Zhang, the work they did with Figueiredo, I mean, they started with the Pitbull brothers once they were already top fighters in Bellator, or at least Patricio was. Everyone they work with seems to come out better, and mainly by fighting smarter. You know, there's a lot of things with Deiveson Figueiredo's like stance and technique that you wouldn't probably be able to change in like a few months. And again, like, how much of it do you want to? It's an awful lot of effort to try and make someone fight completely different in the way they move, but you can make them make smarter choices. So there were little takedown attempts in here, jabs, working to set stuff up, and not just swinging hard as hell whenever he could. Moreno looked fantastic too, actually. His hands looked really sharp. His left hook is tremendous. His work, like slipping or getting inside to the body and then throwing the left hook to the body and combinations off that, loved it. Very Mexican, as they say. But throughout this whole fight, I was just going, damn, Moreno's counter left hook cannot miss. You know, we talked about how, like, that's going to be the next big thing. It's going to be the next calf kick. Dude's just getting counter left hooked all the time. And Deiveson Figueiredo never adjusted to that. Every time he threw his right hand, he got caught with a left hook over it. Every time he came in with like a jab or something, he got caught with the left hook because his right hand's always low. Man was just constantly getting left hooked, and sometimes it hurt him and sometimes he just shrugged it off, but it was always there. And he, like, even though he won a few of the rounds and got the decision ultimately, he never really learned to deal with it or dealt with it in any way. Both men looked really good technically in the grappling, I thought. There was a moment in the very first round where Figueiredo got him off his feet. Moreno went to the turtle to start standing up, and Figueiredo had like the body lock on him. And Moreno was reaching back behind himself with his hand on the front of Figueiredo's knee or thigh, like pushing him back directly behind him so that he couldn't come around to the side. And then Moreno started stepping up with his left leg, and then he let go with his hands so that Figueiredo came around to his right side. And as Figueiredo tried to pull him down from the stand-up, he rolled through in a Granby, opened up Figueiredo's elbow, scrambled completely free. It was a great little move. Hold him back, step up your left leg. As he tries to pull you down to the right, roll through on the Granby. Lots of cool little moments in this fight. I mean, Figueiredo's used to the low kick, generally. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, people are getting tired of it because it's working so well, and they're like, why can't these fighters learn to check a basic low kick or get their leg out of the way of a basic calf kick? And it's because the more you want to apply your boxing, the more competent you get in the boxing, the more you're going to leave that leg out there. So if your problem is the guy hitting you with combinations and using his hands and working his way in, or slipping your punches and coming back with counters, yeah, hammer that leg to death. Because if you can get him not standing on it, he's not going to be boxing as effectively. And that's what you saw in this fight. Tons and tons of moments where Brandon Moreno was trying to box and he'd get caught with a low kick and he'd get knocked off his feet. And including one where they were obsessed with this right hand he landed on the way down with one hand on the mat, like a cartwheel punch. And they were all like, oh, he hurt him and shook him or whatever. And I don't know if he did, but he backed off, or Deiveson Figueiredo backed off, and Moreno got up and was like wagging his finger at him, chasing around the cage. I thought it was a really fun fight. It was one of those ones where it was like a mile a minute, so I don't remember all the details of it, just a few cool things I really liked. But Figueiredo dropped him in was it the second or the third, with a good right hand. And got himself back into the fight, and Figueiredo picked up the victory and said, we'll do a fourth in Mexico. And apparently that'll be the first time that any two fighters have fought 4 times in the UFC. And honestly, it's just whizzed by, those 3 fights. The first one, really hard-fought draw, which is probably the most reflective of their skills, to be honest, because the 2 fights, aside from that blowout in the second, the 2 fights have been so competitive and close. Moreno obviously did amazing work, overwhelmed him in the second fight. This fight, Figueiredo, we were all convinced he looked like he was going to look bad because he looked like shit during the presser week. I mean, he famously has a very bad cut, and he was even more moody and off, aloof than usual. It seemed like he was going to have a horrible time, and he came out, and not only did he look fine, he looked great over 25 minutes. He didn't look like he gassed at all, or any more than Moreno, who seemed to have a perfectly fine cut. But yeah, fun things happening in that division. So let's go down to what else happened on this card. Michel Pereira versus Andre Fialho. This was very similar to that Czech Congo versus Sergey Haritonov fight I told you to check out a couple of weeks ago. Fialho backed him up onto the fence, hit him with good jabs, dip jabs, sent him wobbling with a dip jab, just like Sergey Haritonov did to Czech Congo. And then it was Michel Pereira's work to the body, particularly kicks, in Czech Congo's case, more knees, but that tired Fialho out, backed him up, let Pereira work more his own stuff. And Fialho was so just obsessed with the punching. The first time he got hurt was because he waited on Michel Pereira to lead at him and tried to throw a counter left hook as he was coming in, and then didn't move his head or do anything else after it. And Pereira obviously throws like 4 or 5 strikes at a time. And also going up against Michel Pereira and not expecting him to immediately try and do a Superman punch off the cage. He does it every time his back's to the cage, in every fight. So, you got to be prepared for that. But also to not prepare for the front kick to the body. At no point did he reach down for it. At no point did he bring a knee up to it. At no point did he sidestep it or anything like that. That's been Michel Pereira's big point scorer and hurter. That's his weapon that he uses that isn't weird shit. And it really does a lot of work for him. And Fialho didn't have anything for that. So yeah, props to Fialho on his heart, and his jab was nice. And when he threw combinations with his hands, they looked crisp too. It's just that he was working against a guy with much more experience in the UFC, against better fighters, and also just much better or much more, many more options. Pereira was going for takedowns, but Pereira was going for kicks. Pereira was throwing kicks into combinations. There was a point where he hit him with a left front kick to the body, picked his right leg up as if to throw a right front kick, and then dropped it down so that he could step in with 3 or 4 punches. As we said last week, having more weapons offensively is never going to be a disadvantage. Side Nurmagomedov versus Cody Stamann was bonkers. I liked what I saw of Nurmagomedov striking from the get-go, and then Cody Stamann ducked in on a bad shot, got guillotined in all of 47 seconds, which is a real shame because I'm a big Stamann fan. Michael Morales versus Trevin Giles. Go and look at what Michael Morales has on his chest, because people were telling me it was a slacky tattoo, and I think it's like a slacky tattoo done from memory. It's like the glove facing the other way and then like a weird feather coming out of it. And maybe it's not. Maybe it's like a cool Ecuadorian design. But this is the second one I've seen on the left pec, which is pretty cool on fighters. No, I'm pretty confident it's not a slacky glove and quill. It's just whatever it is quite faded and weird looking. Yeah, I thought he was great. He fought Trevin Giles. They were raving about him being the grappler. Trevin Giles came out and firstly dinged him with a great right hand off the bat. Trevin Giles has a very cool sort of in and out point fighty style. Dinged him with the right hand, immediately moved in on a clinch. People were like, oh, that's a 0 fight IQ move, but you don't know how hard you've dinged someone early on. If you can use it as an advantage to get a dominant clinch position, then that's a great way to push your advantage. You don't want to spaz out on everyone the first time you hit them if it's a second into the fight a lot of the time. So I'm not going to, that's definitely not getting a slacky for like worst, but why award for worst fight IQ. I think that was just cautious fight IQ. And also taking advantage of it. It's not like he stepped back and was like, oh, I'm not sure. He did take advantage of the opening that his successful strike afforded him. On the feet, you saw Morales was trying to do the Alex Pereira. He was standing quite square and waiting for Giles to try and punch down the middle and then trying to hit him with the left hook, checking him as he came in. Takedowns along the fence. Trevin Giles goes for the I think James Krause calls it the DC2, but the standard, aka body lock, step inside, swing him around to your other leg, and they fall over. But he did it about 3 times because every time Morales just circled around him. And then he got him down on the 3rd time, started attacking an arm triangle from half guard. Morales did a hip, a bridge and hip bumped him over so that he was on top. Got out, Giles got up, and then Morales did some good work on the fence, shucking to the back. And then the end came when Morales was backed onto the fence, standing, and Giles moved in to hit him straight again. And instead of getting checked with the left hook, he got checked with the right hook. And sent stumbling, and then Morales just went mental with his hands. Really good finish, to be honest, for a newcomer. You know, I said there was a lot of newcomers on this card, but they did actually impress me. Actually, no one more so than Victor Henry, who people were telling me had a lot of fights. And I mean, they talked about it on this card. They were like, the amount of fights he had for someone coming into the UFC and then being successful is quite surprising in today's age. But like a lot of his wins had been over people like Kanahara, who has been, not great for a very long time. But he came against Rani Barcelos, or Raoni Barcelos is how they're saying it, apparently. He did need Barcelos. But Barcelos looked so crisp in the first round. Firstly, terrible hair. The full bleach blonde perm thing going on. But he looked so crisp. He parried a Victor Henry left kick across himself, and then he slipped to the outside and came up with a right uppercut as Henry was falling in on him. Looked really sharp. Hit him with a good counter left hook at a point. Stepped out of the way and landed a good low kick on Henry coming in. And you're watching that going, damn, he's really sharp on the feet. Henry's going to have a hard time here. And Henry just stepped it up and got in his face. And he was using the step up left front kick a lot, which is, I mean, you can parry it, but like if you throw in just knee pumps as well, so that you throw off the timing, you come down with punches after every single one. That's how you get really in someone's face and stay on top of them. Because if they ignore the kick, they get kicked and pushed back or like folded a little bit in half as you come in with punches. And if they reach for the kick and you don't throw it, you just pump your knee, you come down and you punch them while their hand is down. So it's a great little move that he was using over and over again. And when he got back to the corner, it was cemented by Josh Barnett just saying, keep using that left kick to the body. And yeah, like the end of the first round was basically Victor Henry getting in his face, grabbing the scruff of his neck with a collar tie and being like, where's your head movement now, playboy? And hitting him with 3 or 4 uppercuts. The whole fight, the pace was just insane. And they were going on about how Victor Henry is one of Josh Barnett's students, so he's got the catch wrestling, and they never even appeared. He just beat the shit out of this striker. I mean, not beat the shit out of in terms of like the number of strikes thrown and landed. Barcelos was still game and in it, and dangerous at every point in the fight. But to do that to someone of Raoni Barcelos' level is very impressive. So Victor Henry, definitely on the boy list, watching him from now on. And I'm going back and watching all those fights against dudes who aren't really that good in Japan, but now he's at the high levels and he's doing the same things. So mad respect to him. Another boy, Jack Della Maddalena. You know, I raved about him on the Boycast a while ago. And I think I put that clip up on the YouTube as well, but just a really exciting prospect from the Contender Series. But gets a last-minute replacement who, again, only has 4 fights on his record. So it was a bit of a harsh mismatch. And what you saw was Della Maddalena going southpaw, establishing the jab, so he's punishing him on the lead. And then every time that Rodriguez comes back, Maddalena fades away and then comes back with a counter of his own. So he's getting the first and last of every exchange, which is incredibly demoralizing because what do? You sit there and you get your nose flattened by the jab. And when you lash out at him, you just open yourself up to real left hands and right hooks and proper punches that aren't the jab that are actually going to hurt you. And that's how the end happened, like a jab, step back, a little galloping step, so right foot back or lead foot back, and then rear foot back as opposed to rear foot and then lead foot. So a little galloping step back and a counter left hand, put Rodriguez down, waited a second for the ref to get in, didn't get in quite in time, hit him again. Yeah, I just felt a little bit bad for Peter Rodriguez here because he was just overmatched. And it was, on paper you would go like, that's pretty overmatched beforehand. The Frevola-Valdez fight was mental, and I think Valdez only came away with like $9,000, which is mad for getting dropped like 4 times in a barn burner. Vanessa Demopoulos versus Silvana Gomez Juarez. Gomez Juarez can bang. She came out and cracked her immediately. And then Demopoulos threw up her legs in an armbar, almost got her immediately. And I was like, oh, damn. Because I saw the result was an armbar. I was like, damn, are you going to get armbarred immediately off knocking this girl down? But no, it went on a little bit longer, and then she got armbarred again and finished. And I think it's Demopoulos, who is the former pole dancer. She was in LFA as a pole dancer, and she's talking about like how she did a little thing on how like being an exotic dancer and working on the pole makes you strong in certain positions, grappling and so on. And you're watching her like on the pole, holding herself with her legs, just like you would do if you were throwing up an armbar from bottom side. And it was just really funny. I was like, cool. I should take up pole dance. And apparently she quit her job as a stripper to fight full time off this fight. So good for her. And then Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Kay Hansen. Kay Hansen was sold as the next big thing a while ago. Like they when they did the first Venom uniforms, that Kay Hansen was the female fighter they had show it off. There were people talking about her being like the next Rousey. She was talking about being the next Rousey because she was like got a scholarship consideration. I don't think it was an offer from Harvard for softball. She's like, no, I'm going to be the next Ronda Rousey. Doing well on OnlyFans, of course, but apparently the UFC PI convinced her to go up to flyweight, where she's 5'2". Now, I saw people answer this with like, Jessica Andrade is number one contender, and she's 5'2". Jessica Andrade hits like a fucking truck. And Kay Hansen, like while she was getting off her hands, she wasn't doing any damage. And then she kept moving into the clinch and getting thrown. And Jasudavicius, is whatever her name is, Jasmine's corner, just said, don't throw kicks, stand back and she'll do something stupid. I think they were literally their words. And every time she stood back, Kay Hansen would initiate a clinch and get thrown. And fight decently from the bottom, but like 5'2" versus, this. I think this girl's like 5'9" or something. Just too small to be at that weight class. And her hands look good, but she just didn't seem to have any power either. And if you go down a weight class, maybe you'll affect people more with your hitting power. If you go up to bantamweight, maybe you can pack on some muscle and hit harder. I don't know. But at any rate, it was weird, and her coaches were really like encouraging her to do things that were not working at all. But anyway, that's those fights covered. Let's do a question, and then we'll get out of here for this week. Jack, 3 questions. I need a full camp. I've often wondered why a high-level MMA fighter who wins his or her fight easily in one round, not a scratch, does a full training camp for the next opponent. In cases where there is little downtime between fights, why do these fighters need to start from scratch with, say, a 12-week camp when they've just had one? I appreciate game planning for an opponent, but why a whole new camp? Question 2. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. McGregor. What do you think is really going on with Conor McGregor? Is his throwing the dolly, risking permanent injury to several fighters, punching a man seated at a bar, and threatening to kill Dustin Poirier's family a very poor taste pro wrestling work and just business? Or do you think McGregor has serious personal problems, perhaps from CTE and or drugs? What do you make of his going Jekyll and Hyde in personalities? And then question 3, just weight. Weight as in pounds and kilos. Having even a slight weight advantage supposedly makes a big difference in amateur wrestling. But why do virtually all MMA fighters cut weight as opposed to fighting at their natural fighting condition weight? Often the more agile, faster fighter has an advantage. Many, starting with Royce Gracie, showed that smaller and faster can beat bigger and slower. Look at Rocky Marciano's fighting weight of around 188 pounds against much heavier opponents. Why the MMA obsession with not letting their opponent outweigh them, sometimes to the point of collapse at the weigh-ins or near hospitalization? Thanks for considering. The other Joe in the Bay Area, bless. Question 1, I need a full camp after a short fight. I'll never judge a fighter for wanting a full camp just to prepare properly in terms of game planning and so on. At this level, once you get to the UFC, you should be training opponent specific. You can get by in the regionals, fighting whoever and just putting in a great camp to be in shape. And a lot of coaching material I've seen. I always rave about Joel Jameson's MMA conditioning, but even from like a point of view of a conditioning coach, they say like when they've got a guy working through the amateurs or the regionals, it's always just building the aerobic base, and then moving on to like other stuff and specializing more for like explosive power and things as they become a professional and working out how to do these macro cycles and micro cycles and so on. But, to get into like the sports sciencey stuff, like peaking for competition is a very real thing. And that's to do with like what your body can take, prolonged, just getting ground and pound, not ground and pound, but like ground down by the attrition of working hard. I mean, obviously it's not the same sport at all, but something like powerlifting, a guy who can deadlift, what's a big weight? Well, let's say like, the big one, 500 kilos, Eddie Hall, he had to train and peak for that specifically. And obviously the lift itself did a tremendous amount of damage to his nervous system, or like took a toll on his nervous system and body. And he said that he was like blind for the next day. But even like lower levels of strength sport and so on, guys very deliberately peak and they don't hit the weight that they plan to lift in the competition until the competition. It's all building up to that. And then a few weeks after or the next few weeks after the competition, they're not going to touch anything near that weight because that weight was like a full at the limit push of what they can do. And even within the training cycle up to a competition, guys will have harder periods and then less intense periods to counteract the effects of fatigue and damage. And now, obviously, in MMA, you are also doing strength training and stuff. You're not competing, you're not doing a full 1 rep max, balls to the wall, nose bleeding push at the end of it. But you are lifting lots of weights, running lots of miles, rolling lots of rounds, getting beat up like kicks and punches day to day as well, And even if you had like not a scratch in the fight, nobody trains for not a scratch in the camp, because everyone wants to be prepared for the worst possible outcome or like the worst possible situations. They're not training like, I'm going to win this fight without taking a scratch, so I won't take a scratch in training. You're getting beaten up for several weeks, somewhere between 8 and 12 for like big fights or important, high level fights. So there's a case of like athletically peaking. You want to be at your absolute best. It's a build up to the fight. And you hear this, like fighters will say this, boxers say it a lot, but like I peaked too soon in my camp or whatever. And then they feel like they hit their best performance level in the camp and then they went on a week too long. But then, as I said, like all the damage of being in a fight, like you can be in a fight and not have any apparent scratches, but you could be walking around on like a broken toe, a broken finger, stuff that you ideally want a little bit of time to heal. Because it's one thing to have a fight booked and you're a week out and you've got a broken finger or whatever, and you just say, fuck, tape it up, I'm not cancelling a fight because of a broken finger. But you don't want to sign a fight for when you still have a broken finger. Like it's not ideal. You want ideal circumstances. And like, I think with the UFC's strategy of, and boxing too, they do this, but this strategy of like, if you don't take the fight right now, oh, he was offered the fight, but he turned it down or whatever. Like, give the fighter some agency because they want to be at their best and their opponent's going to want to be at their best too. So try and respect people's decisions or the decision to say I want a full camp, because it's one, showing respect to the opponent because you want time to plan and prepare, and it's also just showing respect to the sport because you want to put in your best effort. You don't want to turn up and be like, damn, I've actually been pretty beat up over the last 12 weeks or whatever. If you do like a full camp and then you have a short fight and then you do another, maybe a short camp into the next fight, you're going to be feeling like shit by the end of that. I mean, it's pretty like cliche, but almost every fighter, when they get off a big fight now and they get the mic, they go, I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to spend some time with my family or whatever. And it might be like 2 months, it might be like 3 weeks, but they all want the time off. And it's not because they're fucking lazy. It's because they've been, you've seen a little bit of it, but they've been getting the shit kicked out of them in the gym for however long. Conor McGregor, I mean, I wrote a book biographing him. But yeah, I haven't kept up with all his personal drama and stuff. You hear rumors. It's not my place to like do another guy's dirty laundry or whatever. It's weird because like he was a very likable guy, and I remember going to one of the old, it might have been London, might have been Manchester somewhere. I did an event a few years, like it was just as Conor McGregor had his first fight in the UFC, I think, and he was just standing backstage, just talking to people, like at the buffet. Like he was so approachable, and like, how people in real life are always smaller than you see them on the screen too. So I whizzed right past him, and then someone said, "Oh, did you not notice Conor McGregor there?" And I was like, "Oh, that was Conor McGregor." Whereas now, obviously, like he's the center of the attention in every room, but it's just so strange how you can have such a likable story and be a fairly likable person. And it probably wasn't just charisma. I think people liked the honesty about like chasing his dream, living on the dole to chase his dream, and so on. And he always came across very charming in videos and interviews and things. And at some point, like, the obnoxiousness and shouting at people overtook it, and yeah, it's gone. You know, it's no one's irredeemable, but like, I mean, it's not important that we like him. It's important that he sells tickets and continues making money, even though he's got more than like he'll ever need at this point. He might even need to do this shit to hype himself up, because, you know, if you're being offered, say they offer you 20 million, which would be an insane amount for the UFC to give any fighter. So they offer you 20 million to fight Dustin Poirier the second time. Not even the third time, the second time. Like, you've beaten him once, you've had the world titles, you have 500 million in the bank allegedly, and successful investments. Yeah, it's got to be hard to work yourself up to do that shit. Even if, like, training and martial arts and stuff is the love of your life. If the reward doesn't seem like it's going to even touch the sides of what you've already got, it's going to be very hard to do. And then just wait. Why do fighters cut huge amounts of weight? Because they want every ounce of advantage they can possibly get. Boxing has cut, well, I mean, a lot of some boxing commissions did like same-day weigh-ins. Well, not same-day weigh-ins, but they did like, they kept an eye on like how much you rehydrate. But then even then, people get angry about that. I think was it Andre Ward versus Sergey Kovalev? He had a set amount he had to rehydrate to. He had a set amount, like he couldn't be heavier than that on the fight night, even after the weigh-in. And people were like, oh, fucking ducking or changing the rules or whatever. And you're like, no, really, is it? You know, in boxing, like, think of the poor guy that Arturo Gatti battered. Did he die? But like, he had... By fight time, he was something like 25 pounds heavier than he weighed in, and that was fucking abhorrent in boxing at the time. So in MMA, it's been even worse, and it's just been like standardized as the practice. But I think a lot of people can't see the value in being faster. Most people feel like speed is something that they can carry up. Weight is something where, like, speed is often governed by your muscles and how fast you can move, whereas weight is always weight. You could be the least athletic person in the world. If you put on some weight, you're still going to be heavier in side control. You're still going to be heavier in clinches. Harder to move. And using Royce Gracie as an example is a little bit unfair, because Royce Gracie benefited from everyone else not really knowing anything about the ground game. Marciano, a better example, because while he did fight a lot of absolute bums, like about 4 of his opponents, not even were great, like weren't just guys who were put in there to lose to Rocky Marciano. But, I mean, that guy had unbelievable strength and power at his weight. I don't think it mattered how heavy he was. You know, he was stronger than most of the people he fought. And that's a physical advantage, you know, in the same way that being big is a physical advantage. Being able to cut huge amounts of water from your body and hit the scale at a certain weight and then be 30 pounds heavier the next day. That is a skill in a certain sense. It's as much as if a skill as being strong. It's a genetic thing that you're trying to capitalize on. You know, Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno looked like the same size when they got in the ring. In fact, I thought Brandon Moreno looked a little bit bigger, if anything. But it's Davison Figueiredo who looks like he's brought to his knees by the weight cut, and Brandon Moreno doesn't seem to be. It's just like luck of the draw whether you are able to squeeze all that fluid out of your body without getting kidney stones or kidney failure, and do it on the night. So yeah, I think fighters look at it as a skill, and also as like a pride thing. They have to be able to sit in the sauna and fucking sweat off all the pounds and make the weight. And also, of course, because the weight classes in MMA are so big, we don't want tons and tons of belts, so we do have these people who are like just too light to be going into the weight class above, but have to make big cuts to make the weight class they're in. Cheers, Joe. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. I'll be back Wednesday, Thursday with the Boycast. And if you want to get in on that, support the podcast, read the articles, get the Boycast, be a boy, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jag Slack, pole dancing into an armbar bless.